this, brother.
All right, we're back with Observe This, covering May.
I hadn't heard that catchy song yet.
It popped you.
Yes, it did.
May of 1989 with WWF and Jim Crockett Promotions. When you talk about Jim Crockett Promotions with people, I don't know when you would, or even back in the day, did you just call it NWA or did you call it JCP?
I call it JCP, but I know I'm in the minority. It's just when you've been following the business as long as I have, you just kind of train yourself. Plus, I was a tape collector for a long time, so JCP was how you found things.
Mm-hmm.
If I was in a tape trade Oregon for JCP, that's how you say it.
When I was watching it, they would mention Jim Crockett, and you would see on the graphics Jim Crockett Promotions, but they always talked about the NWA. It was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. It wasn't the Jim Crockett Promotions Heavyweight Champion, so I just always had called it NWA, and I thought JCP was a little bit more for like as Tony Khan would say, the sickos. It's more for
that's sickos. Right. I saw that earlier. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. He's on a good one this last couple of days.
He seems like he's in a pretty good mood. So I don't know if that means TV deal. That's what a lot of people are speculating, is the reason he's in a good mood is because he's close to the TV deal.
I wonder if he's gonna tag Bischoff once it becomes official.
Well, what did he tell Bischoff? He replied. So when Bischoff's podcast ended with John Alba, who I'm friendly with, I like John Alba a lot. So the John Alba tweets that the podcast is over, and then Tony Khan replied to that tweet, to Alba's tweet about Bischoff.
Yeah, it was something kind of snarky, but the thing is that Bischoff had just canceled that show to start another show, and so Bischoff kind of won that hand. I think TK got a little ahead of himself during that exchange. But go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, but regardless, like, and me and you have talked about this, like TK has already now, if all things being equal today, he's already been more successful than Bischoff,
Oh, yeah.
And so to me, I don't know what kind of punk card he has left other than the one he's already used, like today, I mean, he could be a dick, and I'm sure he will be a dick when this deal goes through, and I'm sure he'll tag him or whatever the case may be. But somebody like Bischoff, again, we've talked about this. He'll never be accountable. He'll just move the goalpost and bring up some other bullshit, Oh, you're using your daddy's money. Oh, whatever. You didn't have Time Warner coming after you, or whatever he keeps on saying over and over, So our mutual buddy Danny, Big D, he had texted me. He's like, because Big D pops, and I do too, by the way. We get a kick out of Big Kev, right? Kevin Nash. He's so charming of a guy. He really is. And that's why he's been able to like get so much from the business and give so little back, right? Because he's so charming and charismatic. And when I saw a little bit of that documentary, Who Killed WCW, first of all, as per his reputation, he looks like the laziest. Even sitting down, being a talking head, is like the laziest he's gonna be. He's lounging. He's got his foot. He's like, yeah, well, this and that. So, anyways, Danny texts me. He's like, I go, I'm not gonna watch it because it's gonna be the same shit over and over. Nobody's gonna be accountable. They're gonna be pointing fingers. I've had it. I've been hearing that for 20-some years, so I'm good.
I thought the reason why Danny liked Big Kev was because it looked like he was smoking weed or something. He was so laid back. That's why I thought Danny liked him.
Well, Kevin Nash is very, very charismatic, and he's got a way. I don't know. He comes off as an everyday kind of guy, even though he's like 7 foot tall.
Did you see he posted on Instagram a couple of weeks ago a AI scaled version of him, like with a crazy cut up body for like a 60-year-old man, and people went nuts with the photo, and then he had to tell them, like, oh, I'm just kidding. Here's what I really look, and he still looks great. He
still looks great. That guy always just happens to always look. He's got good genetics. For somebody who always would call off doing jobs by saying his father had a heart attack, he used that one about 3 or 4 times, right? This man has amazing genetics,
Yeah,
as
it's
far
like
as the way he looks.
when my cousin would get out of his customer service job by saying that his grandmother had a birthday, and then they finally cut on. They're like, "Dude, your grandmother had a birthday like 4 times this year."
At least she didn't die, because people fuck up all the time and they say the grandmother died about 4 times in a year too.
Yeah. Can't use that one.
So
That one's bad karma.
yeah, for
All right,
sure.
so we're going to talk about May 89, and then we're going to have some questions at the end. But this is a little bit of a sleepy month because we are post WrestleMania. NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, does their Wrestle War pay-per-view where we finish off the Steamboat and Flair trilogy of 1989. Now that you've kind of thought about it, how would you rank all of those matches?
I would rank Chi-Town Rumble number 1. That's my favorite, the first one. Actually, the order. I would go with the order. Then Raging Cajun would be my second favorite, and then this one, Music City Showdown, would be my third favorite. However, when you think about the entire presentation, this is my favorite. You know, and I think for most people, this is the one they remember because it's connected to the whole Terry Funk thing.
Yes.
So I mean, this is 5 stars, 7 stars, whatever you want to give it. The entire thing, Terry Funk was amazing. Actually, all 3, because Jim Ross also was playing, and this is very much the Teddy Ruxpin era of Jim Ross, which I love. And so, man, all 3 of them did a great job. You know, just I don't know, the little details of that angle were amazing.
I think I like the second match. I think I mentioned this last time. I like the second match the best, but I don't remember watching it live, so I don't know what the commercial breaks were like, because that's what I dislike about watching wrestling today is I can't get fired up for these television matches because there's so much commercials and picture-in-picture that I just lose interest, and I'm like, I'll just wait for the pay-per-view, and then there's no commercials. But I don't remember what that version of the Clash of Champions was like with the commercials, but watching the Peacock version, I really, really like that match a lot. And so I would flip-flop the first 2, but I agree otherwise with the last one being
the thing about the middle one is that, I mean, the building, man, that building was so depressing.
Yeah.
You know? But going back to what you were saying about television wrestling versus pay-per-view or PPLs or whatever the fuck they're called now, kind of style wrestling. Yeah, you're correct. Is that not only can you get into it as a fan because of the commercials, but it also ruins the psychology of the match, because in a pay-per-view match, you're getting the equivalent of a 3-act structure within the match, right? So it's like watching a movie, a good movie in the theater. Whereas when you're watching a match on television, you're getting the 3-act structure for a television show, which means you have to build to the commercial break and then come back from the commercial break and almost get the heat over again. So it ruins the psychology of the match. That's why you see a lot of times before they go to commercial, they hit a high spot, because they're not building the match, they're building for the commercial, and then get you to come back. So it is different. And also, you know, like anything, when it's pay-per-view, because we paid for it, right? In theory, anyway, there's an investment, right? You're going to sit and you're going to get your money's worth. So the brain retains the pay-per-view match more so than a television match. So when I hear like Triple H go on here and saying, oh, well, I'm doing 5 matches now because I also need matches for TV. I'm like, that's bullshit though, because those matches are not going to be as memorable.
Yeah.
You know? So anyways, I've always had an issue with that. I don't like that whole excuse of like a TV match is just the same as a pay-per-view match. We both know that's not true.
And TV matches, especially today, are just very predictable. We know that they're not going to give us that really exciting, crazy title change until the pay-per-view. That's just how things work. Now, AEW has done title matches in the past that were very meaningful, that are very memorable, but their booking today, I like.
Yeah, Roddy Strong just got a title match for no reason
For
on
no
Wednesday.
reason.
Literally no reason.
For no reason, and it's like we've had all of these title eliminator matches. So like, oh, finally we get a title match, and it just feels like there's no buzz to it because it's Roddy. Even though I really like Roddy, but yeah, there's no stakes. I feel like on television wrestling, there's no stakes. It's very predictable, and you have the knowledge in the back of your mind of the time and how everything is a segment and everything has a time cue. So it doesn't feel unpredictable in any way.
Well, I would challenge that in the very recent past though with Moxley and Punk. That was kind of a big deal, and it delivered even though it was short.
Well,
I mean, it was
yeah,
different.
I agree with you. If I didn't know before what was going to go on, I would agree with you. That would have shocked the hell out of me.
Yeah. So I think in the very recent past, and I'm sure WWE has done it as well. I mean, WWE has had a lot of like Money in the Bank cash-ins on live TV as well. So in that sense, I mean, once in a while we get a little different, yeah, you're correct in that it's usually very generic.
You
And
know, my
and it's
favorite one was
Mhm.
Austin and Triple H versus Benoit and Jericho on Raw.
For the tag titles.
Yeah,
That's one of the best matches in the history of Raw, if not the best.
that
I mean,
was
the
that was
cardio level
fantastic.
in that match.
I was there for one, so I didn't see. I'm sure I've seen the TV version before, but I was there, so that's what my memory is. And I think I think Dave gave away the finish before that show too. Like I think so. It's not like I was surprised, though. The caveat back then, whenever any of the top stars did the honors for one of the up and comers, was there were the Dave would always write like, this is the plan today, but it can always change until it happens because the big stars have all of the the responsibility in what happens. They can change it at the drop of a dime. So that was always the caveat, which I think in a sense probably made it even more interesting. If you were that inside fan, you're like, okay, so on the table, Jericho and Benoit are supposed to win. So if they don't, then one of the, either Austin or Triple H or Vince McMahon change their mind. But then
Yeah.
if they do, then it almost means more because you're like, oh, they really invested into this thing. And so it's but yeah, that whole thing is kind of interesting. But that's the one that I would say what was the big one for me. It was like, oh, this can happen on TV. It doesn't always have to be, super predictable booking. That was a meaningful title change, I thought, on WWE television.
Even with this show, with Music City Showdown, um, Michael Hayes winning. That was. I mean, we could draw some comparisons, but Michael Hayes, when he defeated Lex Luger, Michael Hayes was a mid card guy. I mean, he was getting somewhat of a push, but he wasn't the kind of guy that you would envision beating Lex Luger for the title. So that was a nice little surprise there. I mean, I knew what was going to happen, but at that time,
Yeah.
and the thing, to me, the big theme, and Dave goes through it in the Observer, is change, right? Trying to create excitement, and in the middle observers for the month, Dave is very optimistic and he's very excited because he was like, the year kind of, we didn't see. I guess '88 had a lot of like deaths and stuff, and it was, well, we had Brody and stuff. um, and so it was very depressing. But coming into the new year, Dave kind of gives a rundown. Oh, you have the Mega Powers Explode angle, which was amazing. One of the rare times Dave puts over WWF, by the way. And then you had the Ric Flair Ricky Steamboat series of matches, which was amazing. And then now everybody, I think it got 250 thumbs up and 0 thumbs down. This particular show.
He was
Um,
kind of embarrassed about that too when you read it.
Well, I mean, that's the Meltzer rights. I mean, we joke about it all the time. So the thing is, but it's interesting because he wasn't pushing for that. So that's kind of one of the rare times where I contradict myself. Dave was not pushing for the NWA to be this huge success, but his fan base was pushing for it, to the point where it kind of like stumbled Dave a little bit. Like, what the fuck? Like 250 thumbs up and 0 thumbs down. But there is a lot of optimism heading into the middle of the year. Now, it's interesting to me because the middle of the year would flip flop as far as like critical acclaim, in that we would have the summer of Zeus, and then we had Beefcake in the main events, which are already tanking at the house shows, by the way. And then on the other side, we had Ric Flair in that amazing run still,
Yeah.
with he had just finished up with Steamboat. Steamboat would move over to Lex Luger, if I'm not mistaken, then he would leave. But then, Ric Flair would go on and move on to Terry Funk.
Yes.
And then later on in the year, it gets more exciting because then they get the Great Muta involved in the top of the cards, you know. So it's the NWA dash WCW. Yeah, the rest of the year is pretty cool, pretty fucking cool.
And then we get to that Iron Man tournament by the end of the year,
Where
which
they
will
bury
be
the
in
Great
December.
Muta though.
On
Do
his
you
way out.
remember that? Do you remember that?
On his way
Okay,
out.
so well, we didn't know that yet. He left in February of '90.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why. So I mean, we'll talk about it in 6-7 months in more detail, but I will say this. The Great Muta goes into this Iron Man tournament over, right? This guy got over huge, like new star, new moves, and he does the job to Ric Flair in 1 minute and 20 seconds for no reason. And everybody was like, what the fuck? Actually, I'm gonna skip over. I'm probably gonna read Dave what Dave thinks about it, because even as to me at that time, I was 9 years old. I was like, what the fuck? Like this guy is like he's awesome. Like, how could he lose to Ric Flair in 1 minute and 20 seconds? You know, and then he would only be there for 2 months, and then he would become a legend in Japan.
Yeah.
But one of the things that made me chuckle, and not chuckle is the wrong word, but it kind of did. So Dave reports, right, at this time, Keiji Muto would have been around 24 years old, 24, yeah, around there. And Dave says that he has bad knees. he's like, Muto's knees are shot. And I'm like, God damn, this guy had another 20 years on fucking shot knees, you know?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
All right, let's talk about this pay-per-view a little bit. So the aforementioned Great Muta, he beats Doug Gilbert, who is with Eddie Gilbert. Very impressive win. Who was he supposed to face, by the way?
The junk food dog.
Yeah, he was supposed to face JYD. That's who it was.
And I guess the junk food dog just no-showed.
Yeah, he didn't. He knew he was doing the job, so he did not come to work that day. But Butch Reed and Ranger Ross, Dick Murdoch beat Cowboy Bob Orton Jr. in a bull rope match. Less than 5 minutes in a bull rope match.
Well, that's because they had that country band during the intermission. What was the name of them?
The Oak Ridge Boys.
Yes. Which, by the way, Dave Meltzer gets another chance to bury Run DMC. when he was like, yeah, the Oak Ridge Boys were what they were, right? Not necessarily, they don't necessarily mingle well with the world of professional wrestling, but he was like, but it wasn't the atrocity that was Run DMC at wrestling. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's very subjective, Dave. Like, what the fuck?
The Oak Ridge Boys. I think, I don't think Cowboy Bob Orton was very happy with having to lose this match, by the way.
No. And also the match had no heat, and it was weird because the match was very intense to the point that there was a man that was hanging.
Yeah.
Like Captain Redneck, like his cheeks got fatter than they usually were. You know, this guy went all out for this match. But the match had no heat. It was third from the top, and was the third match, I should say. And it only got like 5 minutes. And everybody got cut for time because Rick and Rick were going long, but also because the Oak Ridge Boys.
Dynamic dudes, Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas.
There's Johnny Ace. Who would ever have predicted that one, huh? You know, Johnny Ace is a great example of a great politician in wrestling, because what happened with him. Now, he did have a degree in communications, right? But he started working the administration with All Japan, you know. And then there was stories about him and Dragon Lady at the time. We never know what happened there, whether anything did happen there. But that got him the rep that he could handle being an administrator within the wrestling business. That's where he kind of built his rep. And then when he came to WCW when Baba died, and he didn't come in as a wrestler back in 2000. He came in as an agent / administrator, and that got him the gig with WWF. So he was always very good at being the politician, and he had a little bit of that administrative experience that kind of got him to where he got. But as a wrestler, now just as a wrestler, not as a human being, as a wrestler, he was also one of those guys that was in All Japan when they were beating the fuck out of each other. So I remember one time, remember when he feuded with John Cena and they main evented that pay-per-view?
Uh-huh.
And I remember I was telling Danny, like, we're going to get Johnny Ace, baby, the All Japan Johnny Ace. And as soon as he comes out, first, there was a whole comedy match because it was, what what was his slogan? Got the power, something like that, or something like that, right?
People power.
People power. So he came out doing that gimmick, people power. But when he was walking, he was limping, and that wasn't an act. He had the old wrestler walk. And I'm like, yo, we're not gonna get All Japan Johnny Ace against John Cena in this match. So, anyways, I remember that because I think that was Capital, one of those like one time only pay-per-views.
Big Johnny.
Yeah. And then Shane Douglas is just coming off being trained by Dominic DeNucci. He's getting his first big break. Now, Garrett, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you know? And now this is a real term. Now, do you know what a blowjob tag team is?
Yes, it was the tag team for the young women.
Yes. And every territory had the blowjob tag team.
Yeah.
That was a phrase that was coined by Jim Cornette, by the way.
Is that oh gosh, so not surprised.
And so yeah, so this was kind of the dynamic dudes were kind of, you know, trying to resemble that. The thing about these guys, and Bob Cottle goes over all the shit that they do, right? They ride skateboards and you know, they play video games. But the thing is that they didn't do any of that. Like, we never saw them do any of that. So they didn't get over. They ended up the fans actually ended up turning heels as the year went on. So anyways, keep on going.
So they beat the Simone SWAT team,
which is the Head Shrinkers.
Fatu and Samu. That match actually did get time. It went 11 minutes. The other 3 matches combined barely did like 14 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the match with the second longest time, the aforementioned P.S. Hayes.
I love that match, by the way.
Lex Luger. The finish is really good. The way that they got that done was really good. But like Luger wins it back fairly soon, right?
Well, let me think. Yeah, he does. So it was one of those just kind of like, I guess, just to shock people, you know?
Because don't the Freebirds, Hayes and Garvin go into that tag team tournament?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Jammin' Jimmy Garvin comes in during this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a lot of guys that are gonna start coming in pretty soon. That are the guys that you remember from that era of like Scott Steiner's on his way in.
Sid Vicious
Jimmy Garvin. Ron Simmons comes in full time, you know, to be with Butch Reed as Doom.
You know, what did you think about Dave labeling he and Butch Reed initially as the Ebony Express?
I read that part. I missed it.
I think that was supposed to be their original tag team name, was the Ebony Express before they came in.
Well, Kane and Cole took it many years later in Global.
Yeah. And like I said, Sid Vicious, who I loved in 1989, because he was so different. He's just like like the NWA didn't really have those giant human dudes like that. And when he came in, and Dan Spivey to get, you know, those guys together was just like, wow, these guys are huge. But Scott Steiner, I think Dave was writing, it was like Scott Steiner was going to come in initially and do suplex matches with somebody.
Yes, I read that. I forgot who it was against, but yeah, he's on his way.
Like Rotunda, maybe, or something. It's like
Rotunda.
What the hell's a suplex match?
I don't know. We never saw
him. Okay, so Sting beats the Iron Sheik very quickly. I'm surprised. I'm surprised the Iron Sheik made it to the show. This was one where he could have peeled off himself like the JYD and just been like, "See you guys. I'm going to lose here in 2 minutes." But thankfully, it was 2 minutes. Perfect.
But I gotta say something right now, because there's this huge misconception about Sting. For the younger fans that don't have context of the legendary Sting, think about it from March of '88, which at this point we're almost a year and a half in. Sting hasn't done shit. So he got the big. People think that he got this big rub at the Clash 1, right, in March of '88, and then he became this big main event star. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that he's kind of spinning his wheels. Like, he's not every month they put him with another jobber. Sometimes some matches better than others, but he hasn't done nothing. You know, right here he did end up winning. He got the television title for Mike Rotunda earlier, so he's a TV champ. And then to me, the feud with the Great Muta is what elevates him to be the big star. You know. Because then the next year he is the one, the chosen one. Then he blows out his knee, but we'll get there. But no, yeah, there's a big misconception about how Sting became a made guy after the match with Flair, and I'm like, yo, that was already a year and 3 months ago, and where is he? He's still doing the same shit, you know?
But I agree with you, but what that match with Flair did was it elevated him as a house show main eventer against Rick, and they were able to have those matches where he's wrestling Rick. So it elevates him to like, Luger, where if you're gonna go to a house show, you're gonna see either Flair against Sting or you're gonna see Flair against Luger, and those are your young up and coming baby faces. So and we've said this before, but house shows were just as or even more important than
They were the
TV
lifeblood,
shows
yeah, at
back
that
then.
time.
What did you think about Dave did like this layout of all the things the NWA needs to do? And the first thing is like just fixed, GD syndication. Like he just is hitting us over the head with syndication over syndication.
Well, that was the biggest thing with syndication. Because I don't know, as you're reading these as we're going through the year, there's so much similarities to AEW, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, doesn't it like they got, especially now as we're gonna head into the summer, they got these amazing wrestlers up and down the card. Because we haven't even hit Great American Bash '89, which many people consider for years as the greatest pay-per-view of all time. And so I'm reading this and I'm like, what they need is people need to know they exist. It doesn't matter that they have good booking. It doesn't matter that even their television production has improved. Nobody knows they exist, and nobody knows they exist is because their syndicated package is all fucked up or messed up or whatever. And so yeah, it was all, yeah, they needed to. That was the first thing they needed to fix.
And then the main event here. Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat actually goes on 7th on a 9-match card. And I think the idea is this match, because of the previous 2 matches, this match could go the full hour. So we need to put it on early so that the fans know that, this thing, it could go on and it won't get cut off. We're going to give you the whole match. I kind of like that, but it did make the last 2 matches, the Road Warriors against the Varsity Club and Eddie Gilbert and Steiner against the Varsity Club, the other 2 out of the Varsity Club. It did make those matches like very anticlimactic.
Yeah, I was like, are we watching a Saturday's main event show here? What that? Why is the main event going on 3rd or 4th? No, that was interesting, and it also kind of took me aback. And also, but the thing that didn't make sense to me, that makes sense to me. But the way the card was being promoted, they were also like promoted like 3rd or 4th from the top. Did you notice that when they're going over the card? I'm like, this match is only gonna have 7. This show only has 7 matches, but no, they show two more matches.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, it's one thing to have it take place in the ring early for the reasons you said, but why do you still promote it like it's a mid-card match? It was weird. I don't know. They were still kind of working out the kinks at this time.
I didn't even look at the audience, but I wonder if people left after that match.
Well, there wasn't a lot of people to leave, but
no,
I wouldn't, because the other 2 matches were, and it was also the Road Warriors, and they were over at this time.
Yeah, totally. So Flair wins the match.
It wasn't Kendall Windham and Tim Horner or whatever 25-minute match
where they just forget to tell them to go to the finish. There's wrestling forever in the ring. I rewatched the finish of this match because when I watched the match, I thought, if I'm Steamboat, I'm a little frustrated at Flair's version of the same move that he did to Savage at WrestleMania 3, which is the body slam into hooking the small package.
Yeah.
Because Steamboat, the way Steamboat did it with Randy, it felt urgent and like it was like he had him hooked in. But if you watch the Flair one, like Flair barely has it in.
It's a little lazy.
Yeah, it's a little lazy, and Steamboat has to just basically wait and then just sit there in the move. I thought that was like the one thing, Rick is so great at everything, but of all the times to not cinch it in, for real, that was the one that I thought.
Yeah, and that was Steamboat's call, because Steamboat still was coming off that match with Savage. So Steamboat was probably, this is how I want to go out. This is how you're gonna beat me. But he didn't cinch it in, man. Like Steve Austin says, you got to cinch it in. I mean, he didn't do it, and so I don't know. But Ric Flair, he had so much like pressure during this time because he was also part of the committee.
Yeah.
He had so many masters to serve. So I don't know. But it was still, that's the favorite match of all three. So
yeah, and the I think I mentioned this last time too, is when you watch a match like that today with our eyeballs that has been watching a ton of wrestling since then, the one thing that stands out, or I think there's two things that stands out. Obviously, the high spots in today's wrestling, there's way more of them. But the second thing is there is such a smoothness to the moves in today's
that's
wrestling.
really what it is. Yeah.
And they particularly made sure that there was struggle in the way that they wrestled. And so, because I'm watching this match and it's about 10 minutes in, and I think when I had watched the match, it wasn't too much longer after I watched Bryan Danielson and Will Ospreay. And so I'm watching the Flair match and I'm like, this match is only 10 minutes in. Flair is dripping, soaking wet. And I just watched Ospreay and Danielson do 30 minutes of, high speed cardio. And that dude isn't sweaty at all. It's just like a different, like the struggle to what they were doing made it even harder and probably tired them out even more than just doing smooth moves all over the ring.
Yeah, the intensity, right? They just everything meaning something. And you're right. And I think that's why that's what separates these kind of matches with the matches we see today.
Yeah. All right, so Road Warriors.
Well, we're not going to talk about the angle after.
Yeah. Let's talk about it. So Terry Funk, he was one of the 3 guest judges, just in case the match went to a time limit. I don't know, were they giving their, like, every 15 minutes they were giving their quarterly grades on who was actually
they were
winning
giving their
match?
Letterman scores in the.
So it was Terry, it was Luthez,
and Pat O'Connor.
Pat O'Connor, that's right. And Terry, he's got the big earring to kind of show that he's a little, he's Hollywood a little bit.
Well, he's always had that little feather in his ear.
Yeah.
He's always had it,
And Rick uses that in the promo to basically say, you got to get to the back of the line because you got all these guys who've been working their butt off and you're rubbing shoulders with Stallone in Hollywood. And Terry kept saying, I'm just joking with you, Rick. Like, I don't really need to get to the front of the line. I'm not wrestling or whatever. And then he kind of got offended and was like, well, maybe I should, be here. And he throws this beautiful left hand that, even though I know it's coming, it still kind of comes out of nowhere.
I love it.
So beautiful.
But even Jim Ross being very condescending, like Jim Ross puts the mic at Terry. Terry's like, "Congratulations, I would have voted for you if it would have gone the distance." And then Jim Ross is like, "Oh, that's very nice, Terry. That's very nice." And then it's like, "Come on, bro." And then Ric Flair tells him about this bullshit top 10, right? Which is whatever. Brian Alvarez would be so pissed that way if he heard that one. And then that's when Terry's like, "Wait a minute." But see, what I like about this angle is that there's a lot of passive aggression on both of them, because then Rick starts getting pissed.
Yeah.
Because Rick's like, "You've been with Stallone." And then later on, he raises his voice. "You've been with Stallone and you want a match with me?" And so, so they're both getting annoyed because Rick feels insulted because this guy just came and wants to cut in front of the line.
Yeah.
And then Terry's like, I'm so much of a legend that I deserve to cut in front of the line. So that's where they both kind of start getting angry. But then they do the whole Carney, let's shake hands, right? And then that's when he decks them. And then he gives them a power driver through one of those Japanese tables.
Doesn't break.
And it doesn't break. Although Rick tried to break, it was almost like a styles clash in a way. But it doesn't matter because the angle still resonated,
Yeah. And Rick is on the ground and Terry's got a chair. And, Terry just plays unhinged so well to where, we all know that it's not real, but he straddles that line, maybe more than than just about anybody else in making it like that.
Scott Steiner, and Randy Savage are the three that I could think of that when they're showing crazy, you believe it, you know.
Wait, so you're saying Scott Steiner wasn't shooting? Because I just assumed he was. I just assumed he didn't give a shit. He's just like, I
At
don't
times
care.
it didn't. Yeah, at times it didn't. But yeah, that guy, yeah, you believed it when he was pissed.
Yeah. Yeah, and then that is going to lead to Rick being off of television. Now, Dave wrote initially the idea was that they were going to do the next Clash, which we'll talk about for next month. And he said the Clash was originally going to be Flair and Funk non-title. So I don't know if they were going to do sort of like Flair coming in, not 100%. Terry takes advantage of that and actually beats him to set up the title match, which would have been interesting booking if they did it that way. But instead, they do the thing where Rick is basically home and thinking about retiring. Yeah. And, he's got this big giant house in North Carolina that Jim Ross goes to interview him.
We saw many times over the years, the same fucking house.
Yes.
If my memory serves, I think they ended up going with Ricky Steamboat, right, against Terry Funk in that Clash.
Ricky Steamboat and Funk, yep.
Yeah, and then I think they shot the angle for Ricky Steamboat and Lex Luger at the Great American Bash, and then he would leave. But But yeah, no, this was a great time. I mean, and then both companies would tape television like in 3 consecutive days. So after this show, the tape television, I think it was in Roanoke, if I remember the Observer, but no, it was at Center Stage in Atlanta. And that's where Terry Funk brings in 3 guys to squash, and one of them is Eddie Guerrero. So that was his first exposure. But also what happens, and Dave hasn't reported this, but it would become news later on, during those series of squash matches is where Terry Funk fucks up his back. And he would wrestle with pretty much a broken back for that time he was doing the program with Ric Flair, which is crazy when you think about it, you know? But I'm sure that'll come out later on in the Observer.
There's also, he does like these, I didn't go back and watch them, but Dave is describing them as like, he's like introducing Ric Flair and he brings out like a skinny guy with blonde hair or whatever, or he's, because Ric Flair's not on TV, so he's got to make up, the whole thing with Rick not being there. So all of the conflict is going to be based on Terry just running him down. And I think he might have even brought in a woman that he said was Ric Flair or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Last 2 matches. Road Warriors beat the Varsity Club by disqualification. This was for the World Tag Team Championships. Nikita Koloff, special guest referee. And then the last match was Eddie and Rick Steiner. And Rick wrestles this match with like a jacked up bicep, right?
Well,
he's like wrestling left-handed. Yeah.
It was this guy's tough, man. Did you ever hear, speaking of our boy Big Kev, he told a story once where Rick Steiner was asleep, like he was out, snoring and everything. And I don't know if it was Kevin Nash or somebody just socked him in the face.
What? Why would you do that?
Because that's what, wrestling, they're eternally in high school. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
And so he no-sold it. Like he got up, he's like, what's going on? Like this guy's tough as nails, dude. Like, I mean, we've heard so many stories about Rick Steiner and how tough he is. Imagine working with like a torn bicep, and I don't think he ever took a lot of time off for it. Because he was back at the Great American Bash in that never-ending feud with the Varsity Club with him, the debut of the Steiner brothers. And that was like a couple months later. So this guy just never took time off.
Yeah. Then just in the most recent Observer, as Dave was kind of telling the story of WCW, he retold Dusty Rhodes wanting Rick Steiner versus Ric Flair in the cage at Starrcade 88, and for Steiner to beat Flair in 6 minutes so he can send Nature Boy packing. You're out of here, buddy. I'm going to win this power play. And then he got overruled.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, that was one of the first like big stories that I remember hearing about that I never had confirmation. And I couldn't believe it because it was like that. Why would that happen? It doesn't make sense. Yeah. And then years later, it was true. But yeah, that's a legendary story.
Jim Hurd calls Larry Matisick Larry Matisic says, you got to tell him no. You got to do the match with Lex. And we need Ric Flair because Ted Turner will not buy this thing if we do not have Ric Flair.
That's
So
right.
Larry
And that
Matisic
ended up
saved the NWA, saved Jim Crockett Promotions, becoming Turner.
for another 12 years or so.
All right. So, I always have fun with this because, current wrestling fans or young wrestling fans, they think WWE is like the big bad wolf with their competitiveness with poor little AEW. I'm going to read an excerpt here from the Observer. Nashville this past weekend was the latest battleground for Wrestle War 89. The NWA ran its pay-per-view show from the Municipal Auditorium on Sunday, while the WWF countered by running a show the night before in the same building. The NWA then countered by running a free autograph session and t-shirt giveaway promotion at a local mall. The WWF then countered by bolstering its announced lineup with wrestlers coming in on the swing from Washington, D.C., with the main matches on the other major show occurring that night by chartering a plane in from Indianapolis and flying in the top two matches from that show. So that's how much they were trying to kill the other's show. And if I'm remembering, I don't have the number here, but the WWF house show outdrew the pay-per-view like 2-1 or something, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, they were on fire at that time, so that's understandable. And also, this was common. Every pay-per-view had a house show from the WWF the night before. I can't think of any time where they didn't run the local market before, So,
yeah.
And remember, they used to do the thing where they would run late so the production team couldn't get in till later on. Little things like that, And so that's not surprising. I mean, they're at war, and none of the shit that even happens today surprises me.
No, not at all. But also, we have the context of what used to happen, which is what makes me laugh, because people who don't have that context, they think it's so unfair. They think it's like, how can companies do this to each other? It's unfair. And I'm like, this is how the whole thing worked since I remembered watching. That was
yes,
younger.
but that's also just like capitalism, right? Every company that's in competition does stuff like that all the time.
I can't wait to see the documentaries where, Pepsi's coming out with a new product and Coke then, calls in all the Safeways to get a bigger order and to sabotage the new product and all that stuff. I imagine that's how these things work in every two company market.
Yeah, no, it's the same thing with the shoe companies. I mean, there's tons of documentaries on the soda companies, the shoe companies, and it goes on and on. I want somebody out there. I challenge somebody out there to find a restaurant, no matter how big the restaurant is, and no matter how much prestige it has. I want them to prove to me that they carry Coke and Pepsi, because you won't find it.
I don't think so.
Every single restaurant carries one or the other. And I'm a Coke guy myself. I like Coca-Cola like a lot. So it's like, whenever I go to a restaurant, bro, this is how I get insulted. Like, I say, could I have a Coke? And they're like, no, is Pepsi okay? Now, it's not a question. It's a statement they're making. And I'm like, no, because
there's no alternative. If it's not okay, then you're like, no, I can't.
I have to go to something else. But the thing is that they just assume they taste completely different. It's two completely different kinds of sodas. So this idea that they just could give you Pepsi when they don't have Coke, I get insulted by that. I'm like, no, and whatever else they have, I'll take. Give me Dr. Pepper. I don't care. But anyways, I digress. So yeah, there's competition sucks, and you see these kind of maneuverings all the time. And to me, that's what, again, going back to this whole frustrating thing about how cynical today's wrestling, the online community is. Like, TK, he can't win for losing, as they say, right? Because he can't defend himself, because people are like, the gall of this guy, this money mark to defend himself. And then when he doesn't defend himself, oh, what a win. Look at, he's taking, like, when does this guy ever get a W? He can't get a W. It's gaslighting 101 here. No wonder he's out there, like, just talking shit on Twitter or X or whatever now.
Yeah, that's why he's talking about the sickos. This is why when this TV deal happens, I think it'll be pretty interesting to see because, like you said earlier, Bischoff's going to change the goalpost. Jim Cornette's going to change the goalpost, and they have these niche audiences that are so over the top with their criticism that you know their opinion almost means more than the facts because there's so many of the obsessives who are out there. So, but we'll see what happens. I think Tony's going to actually get a pretty darn good deal, and I don't think those guys are going to shut up about it. So,
My thing though, as we're still here in this little topic, we go back to '89. One of the things that I do disagree with Dave on, because I heard Dave say this, he's like, well, once TK gets this money deal, he's gonna stop being a money mark. And I'm like, no, he's not. Like, it's already happened. Like, he's sustaining this company at a loss until he gets this deal that's gonna put him in the black, right? I get it, but it doesn't change the fact that he was a money mark, because he's never gonna go hungry. You know, he's got a nice little pillow to fall back on. And then the other day, Dave was like, even if he doesn't get this deal, the company's not gonna buy. And I'm like, so he's just gonna be a money mark. Like, he's never gonna close this company down because he doesn't have to. That's literally the definition of a money mark. Like, I think Dave thinks that a money mark, well, I don't even get it, because a money mark is a definition of somebody who has money, and this is like their little plaything, and it doesn't matter if they make money or not. That's where TK's at right now, you know.
see,
And
so,
so,
okay, so here's where I would slightly disagree with you because Tony's business, like Tony was not going to get into the business if, and you and I have talked about this, if Vince McMahon didn't create this blueprint of you could actually make a lot of money for television. Like if that aspect of it didn't exist, Tony's not getting into it. Like, so let's say TNT says no. Let's say Turner says no to AEW. Tony may have had some sort of deal at Showtime, but we know what happened to Showtime. Showtime barely exists right now.
yeah,
He wasn't going to run the company to where he was just putting out money and not getting money back. The fact that Turner actually re-upped him, because I've had off the record non-podcast conversations with him about this. When they were in when everybody was COVID-19 happened, obviously that hurt all companies whose bottom line was influenced by actually having fans. And that money for them came at the right time because it was a bad time for the business. And so that kind of got them through all of that COVID-19 pandemic stuff. So I think he's got a few things in the fire. What his bank account allows him to do, it just allows him to create bigger experiments that other people couldn't risk because he does have that cushion. But I do think if not for the fact that TV really drives this industry, I don't think he would have ever got in, because he wasn't going to go in and just waste his own $500 million and not make a dime back. Like, there had to have been this money coming in for him to think that his investment was worthy. And I'm sure he still sees the company today as an investment. He's got this long-term plan, and maybe when he gets this deal, maybe they will actually be able to make money. But my counter to that was always, he could cut half of this roster and probably get close to actually making money, but he sees that as an investment for something bigger. And he has the ability to do that because he's got that bank account. Someone with a smaller bank account would not have the ability to look at this as a little bit more of a risky experiment because they wouldn't have had the funds to do so. So that's where I slightly disagree. But yeah, he has that giant bank account, which allows him to take some pretty big risks if you think about it. Like that video game, which died a death. Like, that was a big risk because he fronted the whole thing. And
yeah.
I know that thing did not make its money back.
I just know that nobody goes into a business. I mean, I'm not very well versed in business practices, but I know that it's not common to go into a business with a 5-year plan of losses, and then have your profit margin down the road, you know. um and I think when you have the money to kind of burn, you could do stuff like that, you know. And again, many people have said it, including Dave, including yourself. Even worst case scenario, he doesn't get a good deal, he doesn't have to close it. He'll just keep on going, and until his dad steps in and say, "Yo, you can't do it anymore." You
Well,
know,
I think he would change. I think he would vastly change the economics of the business. Is
well,
what
we
he
want
would
to
have
believe
to
that,
do.
but we haven't seen it. Now, another thing I want to make clear is that just because somebody's a money mark doesn't mean they're idiots. There's two
Yeah,
different things, you know. And I think sometimes people correlate being a money mark with being a big dummy, you know, and that's not the case at all. I think what separates Dixie from TK is that TK has like a stable plan, you know. All these doors that are open have possibilities to make money, whereas Dixie was more just kind of driving blind, and all these carnies came in and just took a bite out of her, you know. So that's the difference, right? But to me, he definitely deserves the term of money mark, because that's what he is. I mean, if you see the and even when he gets this deal, being a money mark allowed him to get to that deal, right? And I remember one of the things that Dave used to do. Dave used to discredit Vince's genius, because he was like, it wasn't Vince that made all this money. It was the economics of television that opened the doors for the WWE to get in and be sustainable for life. Was the same thing with TK. The economics of television he came in at the right place at the right time. And so if he gets this big deal, is it really because he was a genius, or is it because he was able to financially, stay afloat until he lucked into this entry? These
I
are
think it's
these
because
are
he had the connections.
well, that too.
That's how he got with Turner. Is he had the connection, and I think that really was the foot in the door. That is the connection that Dixie and Jeff Jarrett were dying for, and they didn't have, was just that, that real big mover and shaker who really took a liking to they were on Spike TV for a little while and stuff too, but yeah, like it's all like these freaky situations, luck, whatever, flukes, whatever you want to call it, that you can have that business plan, you can have that really smart business plan, but if you don't have the luck, or you don't have those things kind of fall correctly for you, you could have the best business plan in the world, and it doesn't work. So,
Yeah,
lots of reasons for all of those things to
I
happen.
agree with you, 100%.
All right, let's look at the WWF side of things. So we hadn't seen Roddy Piper as an active wrestler in WWF, and he will actually come back in late 1989. But he kind of has a little bit of a jump start, because Jake the Snake gets arrested
That's
and
right.
he gets hurt. So he's off television, and they need to replace Jake on the house shows. So Roddy Piper replaces Jake, but he only lasts 3 days. He was supposed to last a few weeks there to help
10
them out.
days, 10-day tour, according to Dave.
10 days, and he only lasts 3, but he will be back, according to Dave, in May of 1989. He will be back in September, after filming a TV movie with Mr. T. I do not remember this TV movie. Did this movie exist?
I don't think it ever happened. But he actually comes back in late July. He comes back to Primetime Wrestling, and he shoots the angle with Rick Rude on the set of Primetime Wrestling. And then as far as the arena, he comes back at SummerSlam, and he moons Rick Rude, which leads the
Ah,
Warrior to
yes.
be able to. So his first program back is with Rick Rude. And I believe on the same show where they blow off Zeus, they also blow off Rick Rude and Roddy Piper in the cage. So they used the cage twice in that show,
Oh,
which was in
interesting.
December. In December, I believe. So yeah, interesting. Roddy Piper was in the news. I mean, he was talking to both companies. If you remember earlier in the year, I think it was around March, April-ish.
Yes.
To the point where WCW-NWA thought they had him,
Had a
right?
meeting
And
with Jim Herd.
they had a meeting with Jim Herd. And then all of a sudden he doesn't go. And then he ends up showing up at WrestleMania with that Moore and Downey skid, which I love, but everybody else hates. And then
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in the only in the Observer category here.
yes, and then somehow Dave buries WrestleMania 5 for the rest of the year. Like he finds little nuggets to bury
So
WrestleMania 5.
there is an interesting change because so he is on the fence of kind of liking the show because it was a great production and there were some good things about it even though it would it was kind of a boring show. But his fan base is what kind of turns against the show. And so there's a moment, I don't remember what month it is, but there's a moment where he's like, in hindsight, I probably was a little bit too high on WrestleMania 5. So I don't know if he rewatched it or if he was getting stuff from his readers as far as feedback of saying like, how could you like this, this, and this? But he does kind of switch gears a little bit on it in the year.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so Piper comes back. He would be back permanently later on in the year. But that was interesting, and then with Jake, did I Mandela affect myself? I could have sworn that they shot an angle where Ted DiBiase messes up his throat. I remember that vividly, but it might not actually exist. It might just be, and so because he'll be gone for a long time because he actually had the neck injury that, according to him, turned him into like a drug addict or whatnot. But we all know there was deeper issues from when Honky hit him for WrestleMania 3, and he's still dealing with that whole neck thing. So he'll be out, and he doesn't come back to maybe like almost November. And so, but I remember they shot an angle where Ted messed him up. Maybe they did. Maybe they brought him back later and just to shoot the angle, and then they had their blow off at WrestleMania 6. So that was a year program with those two.
Dusty Rhodes is coming in as a wrestler, although
he finally ran out of money. We're doing the countdown this entire time.
Dave writes that Dusty is telling friends that he's wrestling for 1 year and then he's taken over the book in WWF. That's what he's telling his friends.
Which I could totally see Vince telling him that to bring him in and humiliate him.
Yeah.
Because the 1 year is true. He was with the company 1 year, right? He left in a little over a year, January 91. But keep in mind that when Dusty was ready to transition to the office, Vince fired him. Vince's like, you're done. I don't want you here anymore. And then he ended up getting his job back at WCW. So I'm thinking he believed that at the time. I don't think he was BSing. I think he actually believed that because Vince told that. It makes sense to me.
So he leaves Florida Championship Wrestling, and
he closes it because it was his.
So he reopened. Who also was there at the time was none other than Steve Keirn. And I just read Steve Keirn's second book, and lots of FCW talk in that book. He and B. Brian Blair really invested in FCW. Dusty is kind of their meal ticket to grow that thing. But what they realize is that without the promotional vehicle of Jim Crockett, Dusty's name didn't really mean anything above the matches that they were doing without Dusty. So it was lots of Big Steel Man, Tugboat,
Fred also got a job with WWE.
And so Dusty, Dusty's doing stuff with Terry Funk. He's doing stuff with his son, with Dustin. But he was just waiting for that opportunity to get into WWF, I'm sure himself. But yeah, so if you want to know a little bit about that time frame, Steve Keirn's second book is pretty good.
Interesting. Okay, so I had an entire different story, and that I picked up over the years. So the story that I had, which I know now you're telling me it's wrong, which I believe you because this is Steve Keirn's book. So I always thought that Dusty leaves in late '88, and he funds, Championship Wrestling from Florida. I think it's not called Florida. Oh no, it is called Florida Championship Wrestling. And then he runs out of money going into the summer, and it almost forces him to go. That was the story that I think because Dusty told it. So maybe he was BSing so he could victimize himself. But he always said, it was my company. I lost all this money because I wasn't trained. And then I went over to Vince. But now you're telling me that it was B. Brian Blair and Steve Keirn's company. And Dusty lost their money. And then he left to the WWF. So that's the big difference I'm learning here.
So the way that I read it was that
Or maybe all three
it
were
was
involved.
it was Mike Graham and Steve Kern who just wanted to kind of revive the territory, and then they reached out to Dusty and they partnered with Dusty. So actually PWF is what it was called, Professional Wrestling Federation. And
Okay.
so Dusty obviously had big visions of what they could do, including changing the name. And so, bringing in Terry Funk and Dick Slater and Bam Bam Bigelow, the Nasty Boys. Scott Hall was there, Al Perez. Steve Kern mentions Mike Awesome, because at this point, Steve Kern was also training. He also had a wrestling school. So Mike
He trained the
Awesome is a part of
Gladiator.
that wrestling school. And so like it was just, a regional territory, and they're trying to figure out TV and everything. But the way that I read it was they thought Dusty was going to be the guy who could actually help them make it much bigger than it was. And so when you sign the dotted line with Dusty, there's stuff that comes with that. And thus, you know, it didn't work out, and they were sort of left to clean up the mess when he went to WWF. But yeah, that's the way that Steve Kern describes it in his book.
Again, that's very common in wrestling. Same thing happened with ECW in '01. There was all these people, Tommy Dreamer, Chris Candido, who were left with all these bills, and then Heyman just takes off to WWF in 2001 and leaves everybody high and dry. So there's a lot of examples of that throughout the years, unfortunately.
So Dave says that with Piper leaving earlier, Dusty's the one who actually fills the Jake spots on the road. And also
Okay.
coming in is Barry Windham. We
Yes,
remember
the Widowmaker.
that run, which was unfortunate.
Yes, we'll get to it when the reason he had to leave.
Yeah. All
Because
right,
Kendall
Saturday
Windham
Night.
already vanished, by the way. Kendall Windham has already bolted NWA with no notice. So he's already in hiding somewhere. And they would actually find him, and then his dad, and then Barry had to leave WWF because of that.
So there's a Saturday Night Main Event show that is very memorable for two reasons. One of those reasons is we get to see Zeus, who is the heel in the movie No Holds Barred, actually cause physical harm on the Hulkster. He is in the cage match. He's on the steps, and Hogan tries to enter the cage, and Zeus just hits him with those strikes across the
At least
the
he
neck
doesn't break his
muscles.
neck like he would
Yeah.
do many times.
um, and then the other memorable thing is they do a superplex spot on this cage where Bossman is about to go over. Hogan catches him. He pulls him back. Bossman is sitting on top of the cage. Hogan is on. I think he's standing on the middle rope when he does the superplex.
Yeah.
And these two giant men hit that mat, and this mat bounces. And I'm just thinking, like, geez, I can't believe these two dudes did this move. So it was amazing, and it's still very impressive watching it all these years later. But
Right.
that was a really good cage match.
And it
For
was
Saturday
also
Night's
a
Main Event.
visual. It was also one of those nostalgic visuals that I remember as a kid. Both of them,
Oh, yeah.
Zeus being there, right, and also the superplex spot. And it's amazing to me because they had done that the night before in Omaha, because it's Des Moines. So this is around the loop. This is
Yep.
like they're doing. Now I'm not saying they did that spot in every night. I hope not. But that match, I mean, Big Bubba was gushing every night.
Yeah.
From the reports from Dave's newsletter. And again, they had been programmed together throughout the entire spring. That was what Hogan was married to in singles matches, and then they came and blew it off in the cage, and then Hogan moved on to Savage, right? And then I think Bossman ended up going back with Akeem, and then they had Demolition around the loop. I always mark out for all these like house show programs. You know how yeah, I mean it's because it's not like that anymore.
No, not at all. Also on this show, Duggan as the King beats Rick Rude by countout.
Which
Haku
Dave
shows
fucked up.
up in
Dave
this
got me
match.
excited though, because Dave said that he actually won the crown at the Saturday Night's Main Event, and he actually had won it the night before at the
Yeah.
Superstars taping.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm gonna get to, because I remember that's another thing that I remember as a kid, where Duggan's being coronated, and then all the baby faces, and they put the crown on him, which they used to do that back in the day. But yeah, so he's there. I like this show a lot. 'Cause it's like a mini pay-per-view almost, because a lot of the matches get time. You had the Brainbusters and Demolition,
Yep.
which is another good match. What else was on this show?
So Randy Savage beats Jim Neidhart, and Jim Neidhart cuts this wacky babyface promo before the show, kind of saying like, you want another shot at Hogan? Well, you got to get through me first, brother. I'm going to stop you from getting your title match. And Jim Neidhart is super over the top with that laugh, and we rarely ever got to see him cut a promo without the Hitman also. So, it's a fun singles match because Jim Neidhart plays the football player with the tackles and stuff, and you got Savage. They're rebuilding Savage after losing the title, so Savage wins very impressively in just under 6 minutes. But Jim Neidhart is actually presented as somebody that he beat that is actually worth a value. It's not like he just beat a jobber. He beat somebody who's a little bit higher than And then you mentioned the Brainbusters match, and then Jimmy Snuka, who
I just come back.
Is this his first television match?
This is his first loop. Yeah, this is his first loop.
Okay.
So
because he's at the end of the show, and if everyone remembers, if you watch these Saturday Night Main Events, like the last match on the show is actually the worst one of all of them, because they're just trying to get through it really quickly, and then people have turned off their TV already. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast. So he beats Boris Zukov in like a minute. And I don't know if you caught this, but in the Observer, Dave is talking about like 40-year-old Jimmy Snuka's physique.
Yeah. Which was incredible, even if it was juiced up.
Yeah. So that was a really good Saturday Night's Main Event. So they're kind of, they're building up some stuff, but really the main thing for the summer is the Zeus thing. And so next month is when No Holds Barred comes out. So we'll have the review. John LaRocca and I recently reviewed it for our show, but so it's fresh in my mind. I don't know how many times have you watched this movie, No Holds Barred?
I've reviewed another movie podcast, but not as it's been a while. So I'll dust out my Blu-ray and throw it on.
Yeah,
I don't think it's streaming anywhere, is it?
No, I couldn't find it anywhere. I had to rent it for $5 or whatever it was. But the thing that because we're trying to watch like a pretty good wrestling movie, then we go to the goofy wrestling movie, then we watch a pretty good. So we reviewed the Iron Claw, then we reviewed Ready to Rumble, then we reviewed Mickey Rourke's The Wrestler, and then we did No Holds Barred. But the Ready to Rumble, like comparing Ready to Rumble and No Holds Barred is way better. Like it's not even really close.
Ready to Rumble is just annoying movie.
It's a really bad movie. It's like one of the worst movies that actually, got any sort of play. I think just the idea of like what they thought of wrestling fans was just, the morons of the morons are people who watch wrestling, and they made a movie about it.
No, you're right, and I think that's what makes it bad. It's just it reeks of being done like with a bunch of like bean counters, right? Instead of like artistic types, and it's just this is what wrestling fans are. So do this, and that's why it was a big flop.
The No Holds Barred is going to be interesting. So the idea, though, now this really has to stretch the imagination. Hulk Hogan plays Rip in this movie.
You're gonna make my brain explode.
the character of Rip faces Zeus in this movie. Mm-hmm. The character of Zeus comes out of this movie. He doesn't go after Rip, who is actually fictional. He can't. He goes after Hulk Hogan.
Yes. And where's Tiny Lister in all this?
He's Zeus, man. He's just Zeus. It's like mind-boggling that they could get away with this, but you pit the giant African-American heel against Hogan, and people want to see this.
As Tiny Lister once said, a white man against a black man always draws more money than two white men. That's what Tiny Lister said.
I mean, that boxing historically is made up of that too. But yeah, I was just just thinking about it, just like, oh my God, how did they get away with this? This is nuts. And
You know what's
and so we'll talk about this more as we review the movie, but Vince putting his money into this movie, he did not make his money back, but using Tiny Lister to run these programs through the summer and through the fall, I imagine he would have at least probably come close to coming out even, because Zeus drew a lot of business with Hogan.
Well, we don't know that. Did he? I mean, I don't remember. And to me, let me turn it around. Let me play devil's advocate here. What about if Vince had Hogan against someone else during this time? Maybe they would have drawn more money, you know? Maybe Zeus as much as I don't think as much as Savage when Savage was running with Hulk. And actually they combined them because they also started running Savage and Beefcake in the B towns.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a mess. So what Vince did, he made it into a tag team. And then they ran SummerSlam that year with that match. But I remember towards the end, there was a lot of fear by the smart marks that Vince was going to run Zeus versus Hogan at WrestleMania 6.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, and that was a big fear. But he ended up actually only lasting until December. They couldn't do anything. And the thing that tripped me out was that I didn't know this. I didn't know that he was doing Brother Love shows around the horn. I thought it was only for television.
Yeah.
So here's where it gets. So here's where I don't know if Tiny Lister was ribbing Dusty Rhodes or not, or does he even care? But every time they would interview Tiny Lister, he'd say that they put this little guy Dusty Rhodes with him to drive him around, but it was Dusty Wolf.
Yes.
But every interview that you see with Zeus, he says Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty Wolf is the babysitter essentially for him.
Yes. So every interview, we would always pop at this because we would watch these interviews. Because that's another thing. Tiny Lister is so charismatic, like the way he talks, and so he's the opposite of Zeus. So every time they would interview, like, yeah, they would put this little guy Dusty Rhodes with me all the time, and he would drive around, and it was cool. And then he's like, I love Tungans. I'm wrong with them Tungans, real good. But anyways, yeah. So he would, I don't know, probably ribbing Dusty Rhodes because Dusty Rhodes was such a big ego that he'd be like, man, this guy, what the hell? You know, he's saying that I throw him around.
I have some statistical analysis to back up this statement.
Okay.
This SummerSlam and WrestleMania combination, so WrestleMania and SummerSlam, if you add up the buys for both shows, they wouldn't see this much business on both of those shows combined until 1998 with the run with Austin. WrestleMania does over 700,000 buys for Hogan and Savage. SummerSlam does like 625,000. Now this is internet numbers, who I'm sure they're all getting them from different pieces of the observers, but that the fact that they only did 100 and some odd thousand buys less for the SummerSlam main event than actual WrestleMania 5, I think says that Zeus was a giant success.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So yeah, well, I mean, we'll talk about that. I don't know if he was seen as that success as they were getting there, but as it turns out, when you look at the pay-per-view buys, which, as we know, those numbers took a little while to come out as well. So it may not be until 1990 that they even realized that the business was so good with that pay-per-view. But going back to what you said about WrestleMania 6, Dave has that in pencil as the main event for WrestleMania. But when Hogan drops the leg on Zeus,
Three times.
He beat Zeus. He beat Zeus in SummerSlam, right?
Yeah.
So when he beat Zeus at SummerSlam, I think Dave writes something to the effect of, well, okay, that's not going to be the main event at WrestleMania 6, because if it was, he would have beat Savage.
Yeah, and another thing we forget, the reason why they had to keep Zeus around for so long was because they needed him for two reasons. First, the original angle was for him to open up the movie in theaters, and then they had to keep him around because then he also had to open up the movie on video. So the December one, which is where the blow off is, that was the video release, and then that's when he gives him the 3 leg drops, and then he puts him away for good. You know.
So this it'll be fun when we get to December, because WWF tries to sell the rental, which, all movies back then, when you go to pay-per-view, they're like, $5 or $10 or whatever. But WWF is trying to sell it for higher. And the way that they're going to do it is they're going to combine this match,
the movie.
So you get to watch the movie. Then there's like a little behind the scenes thing, and then you get the match as the overall package. Originally, what Dave thought it was going to be was a full pay-per-view, or more than one match. But did they show? I think they only showed the one match for the match, the movie, right? Yeah. So they changed gears on that.
I'm sure they had, like I said, they also taped the blow off for Roddy Piper and Rick Rude during that night as well. So the fans there got a whole night of wrestling, but we only saw one match.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to some of the other things that are going on. And I like this one because I really loved this game. American Technos Inc., which is actually a Japanese firm, is releasing a Superstars of Wrestling arcade video game this summer with characters Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, Big Boss Man, Randy Savage, Elizabeth, Ted DiBiase, and Jim Duggan. Thus far, I'm told every arcade wrestling video game has been a major bomb, but this is the first one that uses actual wrestling characters. Now, this game was not as good as the next one, which would be WrestleFest. That's the one that everyone remembers.
WrestleFest was the one that had the fake Mean Gene, right? On the block. Okay. With the cigar for whatever reason.
And that one had Ultimate Warrior, Earthquake, and those were like, big characters. This one,
huge arcade at the time.
Yeah, this one had, I think this one was a tag team game, if I'm remembering correctly. I may be remembering this incorrectly, but I think the goal was you had to get to DiBiase and Andre at the end.
Yeah,
so I literally have not played that game in years and years and years and years, but I was geeked to see that you could actually play a video game, arcade game, because you could play a Nintendo game. They had WrestleMania for Nintendo, but that game sucked. But actual arcade game where there was like realistic graphics and stuff.
Yeah, that one in WrestleFest later were awesome.
Yeah, if WrestleFest was available, so I have behind me, you can't see because I got my green screen, but I have an NBA Jam arcade game. Now, it's not like the OG arcade game. It is a smaller cabinet, but the company that makes them put 3 different NBA Jam games in, and it's stable. You can have 4 players. So I got that. If they did something similar for WrestleFest, even with the old characters, I would totally buy that game too, because that game was just awesome.
I think Danny has it. When I went to his house, you can also do the game. You build your cabinet, and they throw like 300 games, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be cool. I would never do that. I don't do that stuff, but it's cool to have, I guess.
Only in the Observer. So we have 4 little four little nuggets here. We'll start with the first one, which is Dave writes, I'll be on the nationally syndicated Sports Byline USA radio show.
Already?
Hosted by Ron Bass on May 12th. He meant Ron Barr, who was the historical host of Sports Byline, but he put Ron Bass, and I was like, the Outlaw and Dave on a radio show. I would pay to listen to that.
The embryonic stages of the Wrestling Observer radio show are
Oh yeah. Morton Downey Jr., who you mentioned earlier. Now this is right up my alley. I am probably a year late on listening to this radio station because this is a Bay Area radio station. Morton Downey Jr. was on local radio station KMEL in the Bay Area this past Wednesday, and a caller called him to complain about how lousy the skit with Piper was at WrestleMania. Downey apologized and said the whole thing was his fault and not Piper's. He did basically expose everything because he said he knew he was getting hit with the fire extinguisher, but I'd do anything for 50 grand. And Hulk Hogan was on the same station on Friday, but I haven't heard from anyone who listened. I'm just like, Dave, it's kind of your job to listen to KMEL if you knew Hogan was going to be on. Like, why are you expecting listeners to tell you? You're supposed to listen. It's your job. You live in the Bay Area where Hogan is going to be on the radio. I don't understand why
This
he
is
didn't listen to
this
this one.
this is curly hair Dave Meltzer era, man. He's
He
gonna
was
be
probably
at
at the beach. Yeah.
yeah, he's gonna be working on that pack and petting his dog. It's no time for
Okay.
this.
So I'll tie this into our love of baseball here. KMEL is the station that former Giants PA announcer Rennell Brooks was a mid-afternoon DJ on. So Rennell Brooks, the first African-American woman PA announcer, she opened up what is now Oracle Park in the year 2000. She finished up last season. There's drama behind why she's not there this year. She was not too happy to not be there. So there's something going on. But they renamed the booth in which the PA announcer does it after her. But where I would have first heard Rennell Brooks was on KMEL. Rennell Brooks Moon is her full name. Her radio name was Rennell Brooks when I was a little kid. So I heard Rennell probably every day of my life for like 2 years as a teenager listening to KMEL.
That's cool.
All right. Now this is the one that you love. For those into rap music, now let's just start with that half of a sentence. What is the Observer readership like in 1989, and how many of them were into rap music?
0%.
Had to be very close to zero. I was gonna say like 2%.
They're more into the Oakster Boys or whoever had that
Oak Ridge
NWA.
Boys, yeah.
Oak Ridge Boys. You know, remember when Jim Ross in his very carny way of calling John Cena a thug, but he couldn't say it. He was like, Triple H versus John Cena is rap versus tradition. And I popped at that because what he's trying to say is like his conservative views versus being a thug. That's really what he's saying. And that always popped. It seems so like tone deaf at the time, you know. But it's Jim Ross. We all love Jim Ross, especially because he was he was having a good time with Missy Hyatt.
I was just gonna ask you about that.
But anyways, tell a story about this rap thing. Yeah, it was close to 0%.
For those of you into rap music, several have noted that there's a rap band. This is how out of touch Dave was. Rap band.
Rap band, yes.
Out of Compton, California, called NWA, which stands for a bunch of asterisks with attitudes. And he puts in parentheses. That's what they claim it stands for. Don't send me nasty letters about that.
But that's not what it stands for. It's never stood for that. That's where I popped, because he said the asterisks in the very, very, very insulting way, not the cultural way, where they talk to each other. So that popped me right there. I was done when I saw that.
And so then he says there's another rap singer now going by the stage name Slick Rick. So he's talking about children's story, Slick Rick, and the great adventures of Slick Rick. Now Slick Rick, his stage name before Slick Rick was the MC Ricky D. Now I looked, I couldn't find any origin story of Slick Rick, but I think what Dave is hinting at is that he probably was influenced by NWA World Champion Ric Flair, who went by Slick Rick. As the name change. Now, I'm not saying that that's false. I mean, it happens in 1986. It could be related.
Rappers love Rick. We know that.
But also at the same time, anybody whose first name is Rick, I'm sure, has been called Slick Rick in their life before. So that could be something. But
it's the bubble, brother. The bubble got to Dave.
So okay, so you grew up in LA. Now I'm not saying you grew up near Compton, but the idea that the rappers NWA would like those letters, when you heard it back then, you obviously thought of wrestling, but soon those letters definitely were more memorable as part of the Eazy-E and Dr. Dre and Ice Cube than they were of National Wrestling Alliance.
Yeah, especially because they had a time where the National Wrestling Alliance name was also dying. It was converting to WCW. So my brain was able to separate both of them, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was interesting, and the where, because I'm at this time I'm like 13, so I wasn't even listening to hardcore rap, but they are one of the first gangster rap groups. I think back then they kind of called it reality rap, but I wasn't hip to them because I was still a teenager. But what actually would hip me to them is Super Bowl 25 or 24, sorry, Super Bowl 24. The 49ers are playing the Denver Broncos, and one of the safeties on the 49ers, his name is Chet Brooks. I think he had the letters NWA on his wristbands. And so I originally thought, I was like, oh, he's a wrestling fan. But then someone told me, no, he likes this rap group and what those letters stand for in that genre. And I was like, oh, okay, that now I get it.
Yeah.
By that time, I would have heard Eazy-E's Boys in the Hood, I think, by that time, which was kind of the blow up single for them, even though it was Eazy-E. He was a part of Boys in the Hood, or a part of NWA back then. But
No,
all
we
right,
really
that's
can't
your
say that it was 0% because now that I think about it, somebody had to tell Dave this. So
true.
that's cues up. Maybe it was Mike Tenay, because maybe Mike Tenay,
Maybe.
He's into that stuff. But yeah, it was did I ever tell you the Darby Allin story with Dave when MJ called him a school shooter?
No.
I think so. So during a promo, again, this is being in the bubble, Dave. During a promo, MJF told Darby Allin, "You remind me of a school shooter."
Yeah.
And then in the Observer, Dave's like, "Oh yeah, that's because he did wrestle collegiate for a little bit. He did wrestle in high school." And I'm like, "Dave, you're such in the bubble, man. Come on, you know."
I wonder. Sometimes he does think that that's like comedy by doing that. I don't know. I'd have to ask him about that one.
Yeah, that was a while back, but yeah, that was funny. That popped me right there because he's over here thinking he's a shooter, but he's actually like the other shooter. Unfortunately.
All right, we have one more, and then we'll get to a couple questions from your KLB group. Saturday night, the only mention of wrestling over the weekend in the Nashville newspaper was a clip in the Monday morning paper on a fight between a group of fans in the parking lot about a half hour after the pay-per-view ended. They were arguing over who was the better wrestler, Ric Flair or Ricky Steamboat. So Dave was a little perturbed that no one covered the actual card, and then the only coverage was of a fight that happened in the parking lot at the wrestling event over who was the better wrestler.
I would say it was Ric Flair, without a doubt. By the way, you know the last time that we saw that, did you go to Miami for WrestleMania?
The one where Bryan Danielson was on the opener, the non-pay-per-view part. No, I was not at that show.
Okay, he was in the pay-per-view part. He lost in 17 seconds, but that was the last time where I saw these fans wanting to fight, literally fight, because there was Team Rock and Team Cena.
Oh wow!
And it was like, damn, that was weird. But actually, there would be screaming matches in the stands. I was like, wow, I guess it's still real to them. I guess.
I'm trying to remember the last time I would have seen any sort of because you go to a football game and it's always there. It's not there in basketball. There's not enough of that. It's very rarely is it there in baseball, except if like some of the other team's fans kind of come in and they're a little obnoxious. But yeah, I can't even remember when I would have seen something like that last in wrestling. That's wild.
Well, I will admit to you that I don't wear, unless I'm feeling, like I don't wear Dodger gear when I go to the other stadiums, because I feel like Dodger fans are like public enemy number one right now with all the teams in Major League Baseball. So, I'm not gonna put myself at risk like that, because unfortunately I seen how Dodger fans could be with other team fans, like especially Giants fans.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some real life tragedies, there's been some deaths, unfortunately. It's not like that anymore, but we're not so far removed from that to where it can happen again.
Yeah.
So I try not to wear my Dodger gear when I go to other ballparks. Plus, I'm there as a baseball fan. I'm really neutral. And speaking of that, I did text Mark the Mark earlier because we took out the Yankees today, which felt good.
You guys beat them too.
It was a hell of a game too. It was a pitcher's duel. It was 0-0 to the 11th.
Yeah.
So took care of that.
I went to the Giants Dodgers. What's like now? It's like 3 weeks ago. It was
when we
fun.
swept them.
We won the last game, but
that's right.
You guys
that's right.
killed us in the first 2 games. Like, wasn't even close. Wasn't competitive. I was so sad. Ohtani hit a ball that only really Barry Bonds would hit in that ballpark. I was just like, this is not fun. I'm not coming here again. Though I'll be back in a month.
But you guys
all right,
let's in there though.
Yeah, we're the actual definition of an average team. We win 1, we lose 1. We win 2, we lose 2. That's who the Giants are right now.
I'll let you know when I know how that feels. How about that?
All right, let's answer some of the questions from your group. I didn't actually write the names down this time. I was trying to figure it out, but I have the questions. Is it inevitable that WWE will buy out TNA? I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think with TKO right now they're trying to penny pinch, and it frustrates me a little bit as a fan. And I'm gonna kind of sideswipe to another little quick topic here, because as we know from the UFC, TKO is all about saving money, right? Cutting costs, making profit. That's what they do. You know, we've seen all these people that they let go from the WWE that were there a long time in the administrative positions. So they're not about to buy a tape library because they haven't done that in a long time, because they don't even pump any money to the network anymore. When was the last time we saw a cool documentary? It's been a long time.
No one watches old wrestling, by the way, on any of these networks, which is why.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. So you're talking to the wrong guy here, because I do.
No. But I'm saying the people who subscribe to Peacock, they don't subscribe to watch the old stuff. Like I've watched a lot of old stuff just doing this show, but there aren't many of us because they don't push it. There's no interesting way to get people to watch that stuff. The current product today, they don't talk about their history all that much. They don't go, oh, you can go to Peacock and watch, John Cena versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 23. Like, they don't say any of that stuff. So it just sits there. But this is why. No. This is why I also don't think Tony Khan's rights for all of his library is really all that, unless you get a company that really, really wants to like co-partner or invest heavily in just the idea that this is a long-lasting company. Like, I mean, maybe on day 1 or day 2 of pay-per-views being available, they will get lots of people watching that stuff, but there's so much current wrestling on television. Like, how could you keep up with all the current stuff and then have time to go back and watch the original All In? Like, where's the value in that? You have more value. Your time is more valuable than the value of watching All In on some streaming network.
Right. No, I can't either. And another reason, again, so we've talked about how TKO, they don't like to spend money to the point where, well, this is where I was getting to. Their production value has suffered tremendously. I don't like today's WWE production. Now, I love No, listen to me now. Listen, I like the shots. The shots are amazing.
Like the camera work, yeah.
What's his name? Lee Pudding or Lee Fitting or whatever.
yeah.
I know I got one of them right.
Lee Pudding is a pretty good name though.
Anyway, he's awesome. He's awesome at what he does. I love that, right? The sport field, but they also want to do that whole boxing, darkened arena gimmick. It's like with UFC. When they bought UFC, they took away all the gimmicks too. And I don't like. And again, Triple H goes out there and saying, "Well, we want to have more fans in the building, bro. You just want to save money by bringing in lesser production. We don't even get Pyro and Ballyhoo anymore.
Did you buy that book, by the way?
Which one?
Pyro and Ballyhoo.
No, I didn't buy that shit.
That book I was telling you.
Oh, yeah, you did tell me. Yeah. No, I didn't buy it. No, I haven't bought it. Because it's like $40, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty expensive.
But anyway, so no. So I don't think I buy TNA for that reason. To me, it's like, why are you gonna buy a property where it could just be a feeder system?
Yeah, they can just get the wrestlers that they want if they really wanted them. Like Jordynne Grace. She fits in WWE so perfectly. I think she's amazing.
All that said, what going on with TNA. There's something going on. I don't know if they're going to close down or kind of weird. They're letting a lot of people go.
Yeah, I don't know. I have people who I have friends who cover TNA really, really, really closely, and they are not as worried as Dave is worried. But I don't know if that means anything. So, but yeah, it's just weird. There's not. But you know what? We've thought that they were gonna die like at least 10 times already, and they haven't. So
they just
I guess
never.
I'm just gonna. Yeah, we just gotta wait and see if it happens for me to believe it.
But here,
all right.
Just to close off this topic, if they're on the ropes, it would be bad business to buy them now. You just wait, you know, and then you could whatever assets you want, you pick up later.
Yep. Do you foresee more changes to WWE in the Paul Levesque era?
Yeah, I think he's gonna quote unquote open the forbidden door on his company as well. I think we're already seeing teasers of that with the mentioned TNA. I think he's already changed the look of the shows on television. He's already changed the pay-per-view formats. His philosophy is different. You know, he's more about presenting a sporting product rather than this whole like spectacle like Vince was. You know, Vince is like going to the circus, whereas with Paul, it's more like you're going to a sporting exhibition. It's a big difference. And whether or not whichever one you like, I'm still kind of thinking to myself, but it is different. I don't like this. Is what I don't like. I don't like that you don't get, and this is because of the Peacock, and I get it, but you don't get all the superstars when you see a pay-per-view. I don't like that. I think every belt should be defended. I think, you know, that's where I'm coming from. You know, and as a fan, for business purposes, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter for business purposes. Just as a fan, like that's why I'm happy that for this Clash of the Castle, both of the big titles, the Daniel Cormier title and also the world title, the one that really matters, they're both going to be on. So I like that. We haven't been seeing a lot of that.
We're really getting a second AJ match though after he got pinned right in the middle. We are getting a second one.
But they did the same angle as with Terry Funk. He cut in line by attacking him.
But Ric Flair just didn't pin him 1, 2, 3 in the dead middle of the ring 2 pay-per-views before that.
You're right about that, man. I have no comeback for that.
All right, thoughts on Damian Priest's title reign?
Daniel Cormier. I keep on saying it. I don't care about that title. You can't.
That title is not it's yeah. Seth did as good of a job as you could by trying to make that thing important, but
it bothers me that Cole technically has 2 titles. Therefore, this will always be the 3rd title of importance, no matter what.
Yeah.
Now, as far as his title reign, it's non-existent. He's had what, 1 title?
One. Jey Uso is his only
against Jey Uso, and then he took Saudi off.
I guess the Ray match the other night. I don't know if that was the title match or not.
That's why I don't think he's gonna lose it at Clash of the Castle.
So you're gonna sort of screw job Drew McIntyre for the 2nd time in a row.
Yes, but this means a heel, so you could do that. Is he a heel? Maybe he's a twin. I don't know. But remember, heels could go through shit like these. Babyfaces can't. What do you think? Because then again, I'm thinking, but he's gonna be super over at Clash at the Castle, so he's gonna be a babyface at Clash at the Castle regardless.
So I think it sucks for Priest for this to be his run. I don't know if Seth did not get hurt, does Drew McIntyre, win it from Seth, and then you don't have this Priest title run, because I think if Drew McIntyre wins the title, I think Priest will have had it for 69 days or something. So that's a really short title run, and I think he's unique. I think he's really cool, but he's not really pushed as a top guy, so it's hard. And his Judgment Day group is a bunch of buffoons who keep screwing stuff up, and he's like the babysitter of these goofballs. And I just, I look at him and the aspect or the prospect of him being a champion, I go, awesome, looks great, talks great, good enough wrestler. Has a great appeal to him. but he's like the transitional guy, which is sucks, though. If he does get it back another time, he could sort of use that in the build of getting the belt again, maybe as a baby face. Is, my first run sucked, and I got to prove that I'm actually worthy of this title. The problem with Damian Priest, really though, there's about, let's name them: Cody, Roman, Seth,
Punk.
Rock, Punk, Drew. That's 6. And maybe even you'd put Randy Orton ahead of Damian Priest.
And
Damian
Gunther.
Priest, Gunther, Gunther as well. Even if Brock Lesnar comes back, he's kind of like 10th in line still, and he's got the number 2 title. So I think that also hurts him.
I want to say, I don't know. It just, to me, it doesn't. It's weird that he doesn't wrestle. That he's a champion and he's only had one title defense. But then again, when you think about real sports, a lot of times these real champions, they only get one title defense anyway, and they lose it. So I guess it makes sense. Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't see how Drew doesn't walk out of that pay-per-view without the title, whether he's a heel or not, because he's not going to be a heel there. And they got to get ready for either SummerSlam with Punk, or maybe even try to stretch it out to like Survivor Series or WrestleMania, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that Priest has the program with the Judgment Day, right? Because eventually they're all going to turn on him, and he's going to have to get through Balor. So maybe they start that off at the Clash at the Castle, although it would be a cheap for Drew. But who knows? There's a lot of ways to go around this. But yeah, he's definitely transitional champion.
What is going on with Britt Baker? The only thing I will say is there's lots of rumors out there about why she is not, from injuries to mental health to other like real personal things. So I don't even really want to speculate on Britt, because there's just the risk of something really being serious as the reason why she's not. And I would just rather, if that story does eventually come out, have it come out rather than even try to pretend like I know. It sounds like it's a more serious thing than maybe we would have realized, though. So that is why I don't want to. Yeah.
Well, here's
all right.
Here's what I will say about. Okay, here's what I will say. Not what's going on with her, because I don't know, but I will say that I feel bad for her. I've seen this before. I remember when Lita went down in 2002 with her broken neck, and she came back in late 2003. The business had passed her by. She was still wrestling like 2001, 2002. And then we also saw the same thing with Saraya. When she came back, it took her a little while to find her groove. She's still not top 10 even with the women, I don't think.
Yeah.
And so I think when Britt comes back, the women's division has evolved past her at this point from the ability that she had when she was there. And it's not her fault. But that's what it is. Like, I can't see her keeping up with like Mercedes Moné or any of the Japanese women that are coming in, right? Do you agree with me? Because I mean, it's going to be hard.
From a wrestling perspective, you're 100% right. The thing that she has on her side, she can talk.
Yeah, she's got a lot of charisma.
And Tony Khan really likes her. So Tony Khan sees her as, the top of the echelon of that division. So she has those things. Yeah, the wrestling will have to get better, because it is getting better as before our eyes. It's getting better. So
yes, yeah. So I think that's going to be a little barrier when she does get back.
And who's kind of, we'll see how this Toni Storm versus Mariah May thing comes out, but I think Mariah May has the prospects of being like,
I think she's awesome,
one of the top women. Like, and so then she jumps ahead, then Britt goes down another step. So that's something that she'd have to come back for.
Yes, I think Mariah May is awesome. It took her a little bit. It took her a little bit to adapt to American style. She was primarily wrestling, in Japan and in the UK. But coming here, man, every week she gets better.
She got a motorboat spot on television. Over.
What?
I was in Vegas at Collision. Thank you to AEW. They put us right there. I was hanging out with Will Washington's family, who I knew previously, who I'd met before, but it was fun watching them experience a Collision. And I forgot who she was wrestling. Oh, it was who's the little short, stout wrestler woman? I forget her name.
Yeah, me too.
You know who I'm talking about, though.
Yes.
So they're kind of like, she's kind of making fun of her height. And so she kind of does the thing where she walks up to her, and Mariah May just basically grabs her head and puts them in her boobs and twists her around. So she got a motorboat spot
Oh,
over on television.
okay. I
It
thought
was
you for
amazing.
some reason I thought a commercial or something.
No. Okay. Who can benefit feuding with MJF and not look like a clown?
I answered it was Will Ospreay because first of all, I don't like the cool heel. I hate cool heels because they inherently bury the baby face, especially if
Yep.
you can't keep up with them charisma wise. But if you saw on Wednesday when he was doing that cool heel bullshit with everyone, they didn't want to boo when he got to Ospreay. They were like, "Wait a minute." The fans were like, "Yeah, we're dealing with you because you're here, but we don't really believe you on that one, And that was the only one. They popped with Swerve. He buried like 3 or 4 guys. But they popped with all of them except Will Ospreay because Will Ospreay's got it. Will Ospreay's got it, and Will Ospreay in a different way than Kev. Will Ospreay's also the kind of guy that just I feel like you could have a beer with him,
Yeah.
and I think that transcends through television. He's such a everyday man kind of guy.
I walked by him in Vegas. We walked right past each other, and I saw him, and he walked right with his fiance. I think it's fiance. I don't think he's married. And I looked at that dude, and I was like, "This guy is so bigger than life on television, and he is so small." He looked like I was talking to Brian Alvarez. Brian Alvarez thought he was about 5'9", I think, which is a little bit shorter than me. I'm like 5'9 and a half, 5'10. I was like, man, this guy looks like he's 5'7" when I walk by him. And that isn't to diminish him. That is to say, when he is on television, he is a giant human and he projects. But when I saw him in person, I was like, who's this skinny guy in baggy sweatpants? Like, oh, that's Will Ospreay. Oh my God. That's like one of those things. I know I keep saying this, and I think people think that I'm dismissing his size or whatever. I'm just amazed at how great he is at that small of a size because of how we grew up watching wrestling. That dude is a dude is amazing and just an incredible athlete and timing. And now he's a promo guy now, which I never really saw coming. I thought his promos were good, but I didn't know that he could.
Surprised a lot of people, including myself. Yeah. I mean, the promo, he's got it, man. He's got his original style, and it's very authentic. And I think if somebody was telling me to describe him in one word, it'd just be authentic. That he's such an authentic guy, and that resonates with fans. Fans love to believe in a guy like that because it's part of us that sees ourselves in that a kind of a person like that. The only thing with him is that he's got publicized like mental issues as well.
Yes.
I think he struggles with depression a little bit.
Had some issues, yeah, for sure.
So if he gets a rocket strapped to his ass, I hope he doesn't put a lot of pressure on himself.
I just watched that Eddie Guerrero documentary. I watched all that stuff again with Eddie, which was sad to rewatch, but yeah, I hear you.
So I'm thinking, speaking of, to tie it up to the Damian Priest thing, I also think that Swerve got a bad rap with his title run because I'm thinking they're switching the title at Forbidden Door, and then we're going into England with MJF versus Ospreay, which is a money match to me. It's weird that
that is the biggest match that they could put on.
But it's weird that Ospreay's gonna go into England as the champ and not be coronated there. That's kind of weird booking to me. But it's still a big money match. And then it would also be a babyface versus babyface match, which are a little harder to draw with traditionally.
Unless Swerve doesn't beat, unless Ospreay doesn't beat Swerve at Forbidden Door. Then you got a full year to tell the MJF versus Ospreay, where Ospreay comes in as the challenger.
But then that means that we get Swerve versus either Ospreay wins the Owen Hart Cup, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because I thought, but there's also Bryan Danielson, who I feel is being groomed to like this be his last night with the company in theory, and he's already stated that he's going to go through the Owen Hart Cup to get the title at Wembley, and I thought like a beautiful ending for his career is to win the title at Wembley and then vacate it, right? And then you have another tournament, which whatever, I hate tournaments, but I thought that would be pretty cool. So there's a lot of different ways they could go right now with all this.
Yeah, there is an interesting aspect to their world title right now, because I think there is a good argument to be said, or that I've heard, that you save Osprey's crowning till next year because it basically verifies that you go back to Wembley. Because if you blow that off here, then you don't know if you're going to have enough juice to get back into Wembley next year. You know, whether it's going to be, 40,000. Will TK be okay with 40,000 in Wembley? Probably. Will he be okay with 30? Maybe not. So I've heard that argument. I've also heard the argument, what you said, which is you could put MJF and Osprey in that building this year, and it's the biggest money match that they have. It would make Swerve the transitional champion, which Joe was also the transitional champion. So you didn't really make stars out of those guys holding the title. I've also heard, when it comes to Bryan Danielson, that his blow off might be at Wrestle Dream, because I think that's in Seattle. And so if you wanted to have Swerve keep the title through then and have Bryan Danielson and Swerve is kind of like the adopted son of Seattle, even though he did not grow up there. So that is interesting to do as well. But they have pieces. I don't know what the right one is or the right thing to do. That's why, TK pays himself the big bucks, but they have some opportunities. I don't know what is the hottest one, and what one you save till next year, and how long you really want these guys to have these world title runs, and should MJF even be sniffing the title right now? Because if he gets it again, then we know that he's not losing that thing for a long time.
To quote Ric Flair, there's a top 10 and he's not in it. He's gonna work he's gonna work his way up to that top 10 before he gets shot. No, I'm just joking. But
the last question was about Swerve, and we kind of answered it. But is there anything else you want to add about his current title reign and what else they can do to make it a little bit better?
You know what Swerve's title reign reminds me of? It reminds me of the Punk title reign from 2012, where yeah, he's the champion, but there's bigger things going on around him where it's almost like he's not the main focus, because right now we have the whole thing with the elite, the VPs, which I love, but I think the Young Bucks are doing the best. They're doing one of the best performances of their career. And so you have that going on, right? And then you have the return of MJF, and then you have Will Ospreay getting over, having these phenomenal matches every time out. So I almost think as a consequence of that, it's almost like Swerve he's like third or fourth string right now, and it's not his fault. It's not even the booking's fault. It just happens to be that way. And that was one of the reasons Punk left. That was because he was like, he was champion for a whole year, but everything revolved around The Rock and John Cena. Remember that? And so that's how I see Swerve right now. Like, I see him, he's being promoted well. He's getting wins, but then you put him with Christian Cage at Double or Nothing. Like, to me, that's a mid-card right there.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, little things like that. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer this question, because I think to enhance Swerve, you gotta devote an entire show around him, because he is the champion. Even when Samoa Joe was the heavyweight champion, there was entire shows that were devoted to him, and he was the most important part of the show. We haven't really seen that with Swerve. And so
the one thing they could do is have him beat Ospreay. That would cement his title reign. I still don't think he's going to hold it that much longer, but I agree with you about the Christian thing. I thought the Christian thing was a giant mistake. I was just like, okay, you're leveling your world title underneath some of these other titles on importance. And I don't think that is a really good idea, because Swerve is not a made man yet. Like, he is not your ace who can actually do that. And I thought that was a bad decision. But yeah, that would be a way, is you have him beat the up and coming best babyface, even though he's still with Don Callis, Will Ospreay, and that, I think that would cement it. But I don't know if that's I don't know if that's why Will's in this match. It's really interesting. I did not expect that to be the Forbidden Door main event, but
Me neither. I
I'm
thought it
I'm
was way
excited for
quick.
the match.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
excited
excited
for
for
the
the
match.
show. You know,
Yeah.
I'm actually excited for these couple shows coming up from both of the big companies. I'm excited for Clash of the Castle. I think all the matches look good. And again, I'm a mark for the important titles to be on the line, and both of them are. And I think there's going to be a lot of news coming out of that show. And I'm also excited for Forbidden Door. I think I think this might be one of the last years where we get these exclusive matches, because even that's becoming harder and harder to do, just because there's so much intermingling of all these companies year round now. It's like interleague, right? When before they introduced interleague play, like right now the Yankees and the Dodgers, oh my God, now it's like whatever, But
Yeah.
back in the day would have been a deal. So yeah, Forbidden Door is getting harder and harder to book for that reason, just because there's more of that year round than there used to be. But I'm excited for wrestling right now. I think these big pay-per-views that are coming up all look exciting to me.
All right, that's going to do it from here. We will be back for the June month, sometime in July. We've been actually, I want to commend us. I want to give us the old DDP pat on the back here for we've actually kept on a pretty good schedule. Like, I know you've been traveling a lot, and yet you still we're doing your research, and we've been able to do this.
May I was it's funny because a couple of my friends told me they're like how are you doing this? Like, and not much that I'm traveling, it is how much I've been traveling. Like, I'll come home for a couple of days, pack up, and move on.
You're living the wrestler's life there for a little bit,
but it's tiring. It's very tiring because with the different time zones. But I've been able, for the people that don't know, I like to visit the major league ballparks, and I've been doing a lot of that. And so I've been able to hit all these different ballparks, and I'll be in Toronto a month from now for Money in the Bank, and I'm gonna see the Blue Jays for the first time.
How were those tickets? I heard those tickets were pretty high.
I was able to get I got the day pass because I'm already gonna be there, so I'm gonna be going to SmackDown, NXT show, and then the pay-per-view. And I think I paid like $280 for the
That's
three.
Not bad at all.
It's in the 100, so it's the lower bowl.
Yeah.
I am gonna be behind the stage though. I'm gonna do that gimmick. We have that little stage, so that's gonna be a cool view, I think. And so yeah, it wasn't bad. I mean, $280, and then I'm gonna see the Blue Jays. I'm gonna try to finagle my way to Cooperstown, because Cooperstown is about a 4-hour drive from there.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could find a day somewhere in there, I'm gonna either get a bus to Cooperstown or maybe rent a car. But I'm trying to scratch that one off the list too. Already there.
Yeah, my wife's family lives in upstate New York, and we traveled from Syracuse to visit some relatives, and I looked at the signs and I was like, wait, Cooperstown was only like 80 miles that way. Like, that's actually really close. So I think we're going to head back to New York next year. And I told her I need like half of a day there. I mean, that's not enough, but at least it'll be of value to me. I'll get as much as I could possibly get in a half of a day. But I'm with you. I need to do that. I need to check that one off the bucket list.
Well, the Three Giants World Series championships won't be at Cooperstown because they have them in the right fucking entrance when you walk into Oracle Park, which bothers me every fucking time I walk in there. But anyways, we'll have ours this year. Maybe.
Well, I look at that team and I think you guys should. The Yankees are hot as hell and you guys beat them, so that's a good.
And the Phillies.
The Giants, the Phillies came here, and the Giants. I wasn't when we went to Philadelphia. They were impressive. When they came here, they weren't as impressive. When the Yankees came here, I was like, oh my God, this team and the Dodgers, they were the two best teams that I saw so far. So
what you're saying is that the Phillies are just in a weak division. That's why they have their inflated record.
A little bit. They got hot. Sure, they got hot. But when I matched those lineups, and the Phillies can hit home runs too, but the Dodgers and the Yankees have guys throughout the lineup that I'm just like, I just thought we got through the hard part of the lineup. How is Teoscar Hernandez coming up here and like hitting lasers? Like
Yep,
it just
that's the
it's,
team we
it's
got
every
this
other.
year.
But we'll see. You guys have had trouble with starting pitching heading late in the season the last several years, so you may have helped fix that at least with some of the guys that you have. I don't know. Do you trust Glasnow?
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. He just hasn't gotten any run support.
Okay. I wonder coming, come August, September, if all of a sudden we see we're gonna skip Glasnow's starts for the next couple weeks. He's because that's kind of his rep, right? Was he was it so that's something though. That this might be
we got Kershaw coming in the second half though, which if he gives us half of what in the past, then we're gonna be okay.
Are you gonna pitch that dude in the playoffs though? All I see are the memes during the playoffs.
I'm scared. Yeah, let's go ahead and just beat him down.
All right, we'll be back.
Enjoy your legendary status and just take a seat and watch.
Yeah. All right, we'll be back next month for June. June's going to be pretty sleepy as well, but at least we'll have no holds barred. So for Draven, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.